So most religions are similar. Most religions require you to be a good person. Be humble, be kind, be generous. But there are certain aspects of religions that are extreme, okay? And we can call them eschatologies. Okay? So the classic example is the Jewish religion. Okay? In the Jewish religion, if you're what you believe is that you no longer live in Israel because a long time ago, the Israelites pissed off God by disobeying him. God told the Israelites, do not worship false idols. But the Israelites sinned, they disobeyed, so they were kicked out of Jerusalem. And they were forced to wander the earth in the diaspora for centuries. And so what they believe is that they each need to engage in an act of redemption, of humility, of submission, of piety to God if they are to redeem the whole Jewish people. Okay? And when that happens, when they recognize their own limitations, when they recognize how inferior they are to God and submit to God, then God will send the Messiah to redeem them and lead them back to Jerusalem, defeat the enemies of the Jews, bring all the Jews from the diaspora back to Jerusalem, unify the Jewish people, and then build the third temple so that God can come to earth and live with all the Jews and create heaven on earth, okay? That is the Jewish religion that most Jews believe. Okay, like there are a lot of differences, okay, but I'm just trying to simplify it for clarity, okay? But then you have these extremes, fanatics, who have a different eschatology, okay? And these people we can say are accelerationists. And their point is that this is fine, but it's way too slow. And it dissolves us of individual responsibility. If you have faith in God, then you should want to hurry things up and force the return of God as soon as possible. And you do that by recognizing that if you actually, before the Messiah comes, if you actually go and create the nations of Israel, bring all the Jews back, build the third temple, defeat all the enemies, then the Messiah will come naturally. Okay? And so, of course, most Jews hear this and they think that this is blasphemy, it's heresy. Because you are defying the will of God. You think you can manipulate God into action. That is wrong. That is the opposite of redemption. That is the worst possible sin you can make. Okay? And so, this eschatology is considered a fringe, an extreme, something to be ignored. The problem, though, is that if you think about it, what an eschatology really is doing is creating a vector to force the religion to move in a certain direction. Okay? And also, if you think about it, if this is the case where eschatology is a vector that forces the mainstream to move in a certain direction, then whichever eschatology is the most extreme, the most violent, will be the one that wins out. Okay? Okay, does that make sense? In other words, what we're going to do today is look at the most extreme versions of different eschatologies. Because, quite honestly, even though these extreme versions are shared by only a few people, they're the ones who are working the hardest to achieve their eschatology, and therefore they're forcing the religion they are in to move a certain way. Okay? Alright, so you hear this and you think this is all confusing, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you a passage from a biography of Rabbi Sneerson. Remember, we had a look at Rabbi Sneerson talking to Netanyahu and saying, hurry up. Let's hurry up the return of the Messiah, okay? He is in charge of Shabbat Lubavitch, which again is an extreme eschatology. But again, because they are so extreme, they're willing to work as hard as possible to achieve their vision, and therefore they are forcing the Jewish mainstream in a certain direction. Okay? All right, so this is a biography of Rabbi Schneerson. And the Shabbat Lubavitch movement was founded in modern-day Belarus, and over time, it went over to America because it suffered a lot of persecution by the Russians. And today, they are a global movement. And they are powerful in Russia, in America, and in Israel. Okay? So we will discuss the Shabbat Lubavitch as we move along. But I want to, with this passage, show you how coordination among eschatologists work. Okay? All right, so the year is 1939. And the Nazis, Nazi Germany's, again, who are anti-Semitic, they hate Jews. They want all Jews out of Europe. They are overrunning Europe. And by 1939, they have conquered Poland, Warsaw. Okay? Now, Poland, Warsaw is where the head rabbi, the Rebbe, of the Shabbat Lubavitch movement is. And his name is Yosef Yetzat, okay? And he's the father-in-law of Rabbi Schneerson. And he's an old man, and he's in Warsaw. The Nazis are overrunning the city. So his followers in America want to save his life, okay? So then the question is like, but how do you do that? Because America and Germany are not best friends. The war is breaking out in Europe, and Yosef Yewitz is a very old man. And there are no planes, well, there are planes, but there are no commercial air flights that you can take, okay? So it's going to be a very long, arduous journey across many borders. Plus, he will need a visa, not just for himself, but for his whole family, okay? Now what I'll show you is how powerful these people are. And again, this is an eschatology where they all share similar vision, and therefore they're willing to make the necessary sacrifices in order to help each other achieve this vision, okay? All right, so this is from the biography. In Ocean Away in America, Yosef Yezuit's followers were mounting a rescue effort. With the help of Stan Kramer, an Orthodox attorney, the son of Lubavitcher immigrants, the Shabbat activist Israel Jacobson hired Max Rode, a politically connected lawyer, to secure American visas for Yosef Yewitz and his family, okay? So, in other words, even though there may not be that many followers, they have a wide political circle. And a lot of the reason why is that they pool their resources together. And when they pull their resources together, they're able to invest in real estate together, they're able to invest in business together, and they're able to generate a lot of money, which they can then use to influence politics in America, okay? They can buy out politicians, they can do a lot of things. Okay, so the first part is easy, getting visas for the rabbi and his family. Now the problem is, how do you actually get to him, okay? Because there are no telephones, there's no internet, there are no airplanes. How do you find him when there's a war going on in Poland, when there are Nazis everywhere? Okay, all right, let's continue. Yosef Yewitz's followers also reached out to Attorney General Benjamin Cohen, okay? And Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, okay? This man is very important. He's what we call a Sabbatine Francus. What I'll show you later on is that Sabbatine Francus and the Shabbat Lubavitch movement are very much aligned. Okay, so even though they're not part of the same movement, they are sympathetic towards each other. And he's the most powerful Jew in America at this time, okay, in the 1930s, 40s, whom Yosef Yewitz had met during his fundraising trip of 1929. The Lubavitch efforts in America were successful, all right? So they've won over the Americans. They've won over the entire American political apparatus, and they are dedicated to helping the rabbi escape Europe and come to America. All right? Now the second part is, how do you deal with the Nazis? Okay, The Lubitsch's efforts in America were successful. On October 2nd, Cohen wrote to Robert Pell, a senior official in the State Department, asking for help. The next day, Pell contacted Helmuth Waldhat, a German and a member of the Nazi Party, a Nazi, who specialized in national industry and economics, to see if he would be willing to save one of the leading Jewish scholars in the world. Okay? This is a guy, American, writing to a Nazi and saying, hey man, I know you're a Nazi, but we need your help to save a Jew. And the guy says, yes. Okay? Waldhat was strategically chosen. He had studied at Columbia University in the early 1930s and had forged a relationship with Pell after the Evian Conference on Jewish Refugees in 1938. Seeing an opportunity to curry goodwill of the United States, Waldhat secretly contacted Admiral William Canaras, the head of German military intelligence. Wow! The head of German military intelligence. And saying, hey man, let's help this guy. Canaris, a skeptical Nazi who disapproved of SS atrocities and thought the invasion of Poland a mistake, enlisted Major Ernst Bloch, a distinguished veteran of World War I and one of the most trusted officers. Bloch was a Mischling. Okay, a Mischling just means a German who had some Jewish ancestry, but because he was so valorous in World War I, he was considered a German, okay? He had been declared of German blood by Hitler in 1939. Along with 3 other soldiers, 2 of whom were also Mischling, Bloch was instructed to find Josef Yetzet and bring him to safety. Wow. The Nazis, okay, dispatched their own soldiers to find this guy and bring him to America. And this is, again, during war. But how do you find this guy? Bloch and his colleagues had to maneuver through the ruins of Warsaw without arousing the suspicions of the SS to find a rabbi who did not know of their mission and did not want to be found. Okay, so this rabbi is hiding from everyone. So how do you find this guy? And he's deadly afraid of all German soldiers because he sees them as just Nazis. This is another problem. Well, Jews in the city were naturally unwilling to divulge the location of a Hasidic leader to a Nazi officer. Eventually, information came from the Americans. Brandeis was informed of Josef Yevet's address by the Shabbat lawyer Arthur Rubinowitz and relayed it via Cohen and Pell to the U.S. chargé d'affaires in Germany. This requires the coordination of dozens and dozens of people who are supposed to be on the opposite side of a war. And they're working together to achieve a goal. At the end of November, Bloch found Josef Yevet's apartment and after some confusion convinced the residents he was there to help. Once he had obtained fuel coupons, train tickets, and military clearances for SS checkpoints, Bloch loaded Josef Yetzet and his family onto a truck and headed for the train station. There the family received first-class tickets and boarded a train filled with Nazi officials and soldiers. Okay, and that's how they got him out. In other words, they are able to work above the bureaucracy of different nation states in order to achieve their eschatological goal. Okay? All right. Does it make sense? All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the idea of eschatological convergence. Because once we know the different eschatologies and we know how they converge together, we can actually make certain predictions about how this war will progress. Okay.